Syndication through IDX Broker, what you need to know. About us. I am your host, Alec. I'm a multimedia content producer here at IDX Broker. I'm in charge of learning materials, making sure that you guys know what's going on as far as knowledge-based articles and videos and other content like that. I've been here about 3.5 years, so hopefully I know the product fairly well. With me is our syndication expert and one of my bosses, Joe. He is the support manager, and he's going to talk a little bit about himself.
Yeah, Alec and I came on board around the same time. I'm happy that you're all in attendance today. I worked a lot with Zillow to kind of get our spec up and running. We do a lot of processing on our end, so I'm happy to be talking about what we've put in the works to make this feature one that you'll be able to leverage in the future.
Excellent. So enough about us. Let's talk about syndication. So today, what we will cover. So we're here to talk about syndication, not specifically advocate on behalf of the Zillow Group or any specific syndication portal. We use them as an example because they're kind of making the biggest waves. They're the biggest fish in the pond at this point. We assume that all of you are going to want to be on Zillow or Trulia or one of those bigger sites to get more views on your listings. We're not affiliated in any way with the Zillow Group. So we will cover what happens on our end of the process, but we can't really speak to how they decide what information goes up or how they process that or their timelines or anything like that. We have no way to tell how they are going to specifically display a listing. Many MLS now send direct feeds to Zillow Group, so that is also outside of control. So again, this is just going to be what we send out. Portal sites definitely do want your listings. They want the most accurate information to give to their clients, and obviously they want some advertising dollars thrown in there as well. And as far as we go, we built in the options for syndication to make it easier for you. You know, we have the individual real estate websites, but we know that sometimes your clients are going to ask for more. Sometimes you just want more eyes on those things. So we went ahead and built in the options to syndicate, to send out your listings from our specific source to the Zillows, the Home Finders, the other sources out there that will get you a little more traction and a little more eyes. So we're going to go over maybe what our XML file looks like a little bit, what information we send out, and how that is done. So the definition of syndication is to supply listing information for simultaneous publication in multiple places. Basically, you can edit your listings in IDX Broker. We pull that information in from the MLS, and then you can make a little bit of changes, make sure that it's accurate on your end, and then that information gets sent from one location to all the multiple sources. We use the most recent specifications from Zillow Group. We compile and build a file with their specific guidelines. Now, these have changed a little bit in the past, and we're currently using the most recent ones, and we are working on even a newer version that will be faster, that'll have a little bit more information in it, and that hopefully will be future-proofed. Joe has worked really hard with the Zillow Group to make sure that we're in sync, that our data matches the data that they want, and then we will send them one file that will be graduated or sent across to Zillow, to Trulia, to all of their sites, so that we don't have to send different information to one versus the other. And again, that's future-proofed so that we don't have to keep going back and forth and having your listings kicked off because they don't match the proper specs. Here's an example of what that XML file might look like. To many of you, this might be gobbledygook, but basically, if you know XML, it's fairly simple. There's a location, and then within that location, there's an address, there's a city, state, etc. This is all very specific as far as what they want and what they don't want. So your feed from the MLS, your feed from IDX Broker may have a lot more information available, but Zillow wants to make sure that everybody has the same information and they don't want additional data that's going to cloud up all of their stuff. So we send them a file that looks very similar to this with your agent information. That's email address and phone number is how they judge all of that. Again, this is an example file. We collect everyone who opts in to syndicate to the Zillow Group. We put them all in one giant XML file, and then we ship that off to Zillow Group so that they can have all of that in one instead of piecemealing it and sending it one at a time. So why would you want to syndicate? Obviously, you want control over your content, and you may have built out a beautiful site and you want traffic to that site because you're the expert, you know the properties, you're local, you're on the ground, you have all that data. Why do you need it in a big portal site where it's mixed in with people from Arkansas and Alaska and Oklahoma and all over the nation? So one is exposure. So when it comes to exposure of your listings, and in the view of agents, often the more the better. In first quarter of 2017, there were 166 million unique visitors to the Zillow Group and their websites. Obviously, that's a lot of eyes. They're not all looking for your house, but if they're going around, if they're in Dallas and they're looking to move up to Minneapolis, well, they might not know about your specific website. The first thing that comes up is probably going to be Zillow because they're all over and they have that SEO juice. So in order to get your eyes in front of that person in Dallas, you might need, a little bit broader scope. In March of 2017, they have a record breaking of 180 million unique visitors. So obviously they've got the eyeballs, they've got the views. And then just demand. As the biggest thing out there, when your client comes to you and they say, okay, my house has been up for the weekend, it should have sold right now, right? When I look the internet, all I see is Zillow and it's not on there. What's happening? What's going on? I need those visitors. I need those views. I need my house sold yesterday. So you might get some demand specifically from your clients, specifically from your sellers, to see this information on Zillow, to see it on your site, on Zillow's site, anywhere that they can get. And then another thing, you can actually increase your attendance on an open house if you have it at more sites. The bigger the net, the more fish you're going to get them to an open house, to run them through your properties.
Yeah, we've got some good questions out here regarding, hey, if your MLS has already established a direct feed, which many have. If you're kind of wondering if your MLS has, I would refer you to your board just to see if they've already established that direct connection. Alternatively, your broker, there is an accommodation made for large brokerages. The stated count that we've heard is about 200. So brokerages with in excess of 200 listings, they will work with you. Of course, I would have to put a little asterisk. This type of setup, I would direct you to Zillow Group for further inquiry and information. However, if you're wondering how your listings may be syndicated, I would say check with your broker MLS if you had no action in getting that data there. Hopefully you're well abreast and well aware of what your MLS may be doing on your behalf. So these are some good questions rolling in. Thank you for sending them.
Okay, excellent. So that was why syndicate at all. And then caveats. Joe went over some of those, but we can hit those again. Your MLS may not allow syndication. There are some MLSs that have an agreement with Zillow. Zillow's trying to pick those up as much as possible to get a direct line. Just like we have direct data feeds from MLSs, it's just easier that way than trying to pull them from all different sources. But some MLSs have decided not to work with Zillow Group, or they just don't have one yet, or they're dissatisfied with the competition between Zillow and their local realtors. So they may not allow syndication. And some of the MLS may not even allow syndication from us. And they've asked us to turn that off and not make that available. So be aware that if you don't see it on Zillow, you come back to us. There are some MLSs that say, hey, no, Zillow's a no-go. We don't want our listings syndicated. We want to keep them local. And then multiple sources. So as many of you may know, there are fairly new rules from the Zillow Group that don't allow manual input of listings. And this is basically because they want to reduce the chance of error. So they're asking for feeds from third-party sources like IDX Broker. They're asking for MLS feeds from, like Joe said, from larger brokerages where they have maybe one person inputting, but they have maybe a ton of agents going through a single funnel. Maybe they're better tracked. Maybe there's less mistakes in that. They want basically fewer sources so that fewer mistakes are happening there. And then one thing you should be aware of is agents in Zillow are tied to an email address. So if you have a Zillow account and you have your email in that, you want to make sure that is the same email address that you're using on all of your MLS paperwork, because that's the email address that pulls in to your listing. And then make sure that is the same email address you're using as your user in IDX Broker. So in IDX Broker, there's a primary email address on the account itself, if you're a single agent account like that. And then if you have an office account, each of those office users should be set up as a user in IDX Broker. And in there is also a place to make sure that you have an email address. And make sure that's the same email address all the way around. Because even if your name comes through as Jonathan Brokerage, if that is john@123gmail.com and the one that you have in the MLS is john@brokerage.com, they're not going to pull that through. It's going to be attributed to a different user and a different agent. So like I said, we're continually working on making syndication easier for you, making it fit the specs that we get from all of our syndication partners, including Zillow Group. And with the new feeds, we're hoping this is going to be, when we pull this out, which is very shortly, it'll be an hourly feed. So everything will be constantly updated. It'll have a little more information in there. And all you have to do on the IDX Broker side is go to Listings and Syndication and just turn it on. There should be next to any of the places you want to syndicate to, there should be a Y or an N. If it's N, it's not currently syndication to that. You just click that N to Y. And then as soon as the syndication cycle comes up, that will be available. On some of them, it will have an XML file available for you. You can take that link to the XML file and send it to your syndication partner. In the case of Zillow Group and one or two others, we actually will take care of that for you, because on behalf of everyone that has said yes on that, we send a huge file over to them and you don't have to do anything else. You just said, yes, I want to syndicate. That's all taken care of by us, between us and the syndication partner. Have we any other questions?
We have a few good ones. Frequency of syndication, we have a kind of overall catch-all. So essentially whatever property's been added in that day, we will make sure that every night it will catch everything. There is a differentiation between the MLS feed and data update times. So for instance, if we are updating your particular feed every 2 or 3 hours, we will put that particular MLS on a higher updating feed for the Zillow Group. What that means is you won't have to wait nightly or overnight to see that property available and showing and displaying on the Zillow Group side. That just means that we are compiling that file and it's available for consumption and distribution at a more frequent rate. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We'll probably link some information when we wrap up this webinar. That'll help and aid you to see whether or not you should be on that feed that is updating faster.
And definitely, if your listing information is incorrect, please go ahead and reach out to us. It may be on our side that the information is not going over correctly. It could be from a different source, but we're happy to look into that for you, make sure that we track it down, see where that incorrect information is coming from, and help you get that corrected for you. Just looking over a few more questions. If we do run out of time and don't have the opportunity to answer your question, or it's a more complicated question, don't worry, we'll get to it. Or you're always welcome to email us at help@idxbroker.com, and we'll have one of our support staff look over that and give it a little more attention and then get back to you with the proper answer.
We have a question about does IDX Broker know if an MLS broker has turned off their Zillow Group spigot and no longer allowing listings to syndicate? If yes, does IDX Broker alert agents that the board has changed their rules? So we will essentially, that on-off toggle is on our end, and we pretty much get that direct notification from your MLS, from that board member who's maybe disallowing this from happening. At that point, we would disable the feed from being compiled by that aggregate and or hourly feed that is requesting that information. And then a big notice would land in your syndication page that says, for reasons related to rules, we are unable to facilitate syndication for this particular feed. So yes, you would be aware.
There won't be necessarily an email notification, but go ahead and check your listing syndication page on IDX Broker if you notice something's a little weird on there, and there definitely will be notification right there.
Okay, we have some other questions regarding sold syndication. We are not currently syndicating sold information. Almost every rule set we've seen and reviewed and read would prohibit this practice. So granted, that's probably a question for Zillow Group about they may be multi-sourcing that information, as well as there's an avenue for you to go and update and or correct on their end. Again, that's a service that's kind of separate from us, but we would not be able to syndicate sold and feel good about that at all. Supplemental listings, that's another question that's kind of rolling in. So at the moment, yes, we are facilitating supplemental listings. So these are, oftentimes pocket listings. They can have a little bit more scrutiny. So for instance, if you throw in a supplemental listing, enter all the information, it would still have to meet the minimum specification requirement that Zillow Group communicated to us. So it would still have to have a full set of information, price, status, photos, and other details as well. However, if it ends up that there was something that could be potentially prohibited, that would be flagged. And if you did not see that on the front end of Zillow Group, you are more than welcome to reach out to us. We'll check it, see the actual instance in our XML file, and look for a reason why it may not have arrived on the Zillow Group end. At that point, we're more than happy to work with you to contact Zillow and see what may be preventing that particular supplemental from making it to the front end. There's a question about priority. So with all of all this data that is flowing towards the Zillow Group side, obviously there's a priority structure on their end. We wouldn't be able to speak to the exact nature of how they prioritize, nor do I think that they would be particularly candid about sharing that information as well. But the reason we kind of recommend syndicating is as a catch-all is in the event there is a failure at some other access point. So at the MLS point, at the direct feed, if anybody is familiar with different types of RETS servers, if there's something that fails at that end, you would be backed up with a feed that we would provide. So there is a layer. MLS feeds can come direct from the MLS. A broker can establish a feed, and you could have your own feed that is available for their consumption. As to what they're looking for specifically, they're probably going to go with the set that provides the most full data set. However, again, when we talked about that multi-sourcing effort, it's likely that any data is great data for them to kind of pull and look just to make sure that the listing is as complete as humanly possible. So Realtor.com, that's another syndication outlet. Obviously, if you're a member of the National Associations of Realtors, you are probably familiar with Realtor.com, and it's highly likely that your MLS has already established a direct feed with them. We are not currently servicing that syndication hub, namely because all of that is already established, and they do not necessarily have a big spec for vendors or other syndication providers to syndicate that information due to the fact that they likely already have it. And lastly, we just have a couple more questions. If we wanted to pull our own feed, what format do we have to put it in, and how do we upload it? So there are ways you could follow the Zillow spec. This would be outside of what we would do. So if you are looking at building your own XML file, typically, again, it will be per the Zillow Group rules and regulations. So as far as we are aware, those direct feeds are usually for brokerages in excess of 200 listings. Again, I would have to refer you to Zillow Group for the yay or nay on how you would proceed establishing that connection. But if you're looking for that avenue, it should be available to you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us. Like Joe said, we're running a little low on time. Hopefully we've answered most of your questions. Again, thank you for joining us today, and have a wonderful rest of your week.